I think it's very important to realise that we live in a kind of pornified culture.
How do we live in a pornified culture? There's a porn everywhere. I personally don't see it.
So you've got the boys who go to the gonzo porn.
No, they fucking don't. She's making that shit up. And there's nothing wrong with gonzo porn. The biggest problem is if your interpretation of gonzo porn.
And you've got the girls who consume pop culture images of Rihanna, Beyonce, Paris Hilton.
I don't have a single problem with Rihanna or Beyonce, minus the fact that Beyonce seems to be singing the same song over and over again about how a man broke up or cheated on her and how much she hates him. But anyway, that's beside the point. Rihanna and Beyonce are both talented singers, and I have a number of their albums. As for Paris Hilton, that's pretty much a horse of a different colour.
I mean, just think how Paris Hilton got famous. She got famous for her sex tape being released.
To quote South Park on Paris Hilton, she is a spoiled, rotten whore and an idiot, and a waste of perfectly good oxygen, and anorexic as all hell.
Okay, now first of all, what's important about that is the sex tape was made by her then boyfriend, who was 11 years older than her and married at the time, and released into the porn market against her will.
Honestly, I don't see anything wrong with that. It's an argument between 2 or maybe 3 different people. And Paris Hilton probably had a lot of money and resources, so she could probably have stopped that if she really wanted to.
So Paris Hilton is a kind of joke everywhere. But you know what? It wasn't funny what happened to that young woman.
Well, fuck you. I think it was absolutely hilarious what happened to her.
And then she decided, OK, you're going to call me a slut? I'm going to be the best slut you've ever seen. And that's what you saw in a way.
So that's her marketing.
That's her brand,
yeah,
yes.
Her brand.
But you know what's very interesting? When you look at studies of young girls who are branded sluts.
Sounds like slut shaming, probably exactly the same thing that you're guilty of, absolutely.
They don't make millions like Paris Hilton. They end up with high anxiety, depression, increased alcohol and drug abuse. In fact, being branded as a slut in high school or elementary school is a lot like a public rape of your identity.
Personally, I think we should live in a free and open society about our sexuality, and where people can have their sexuality defined by their individuality, rather than having some blowhard saying what is or isn't right for them, like you.
And these girls have post-traumatic stress disorder very similar to rape victims. So why Paris Hilton, who's a multi-millionaire, can walk around with the brand slut on her with pride, it doesn't work for most women.
If I recall, a few years ago there was actually a film called Easy A which actually touched on this subject a lot better and a lot more funny than I could ever hope to.
Or girls.
The Minister of Welfare in Iceland, Guðbjartur Hannesson, thinks it's not right to fight this with legislation.
Which he's absolutely right not to fight with legislation, because that would just lead to censorship, which according to Gail Dines, she isn't pro-censorship, although she thinks that there should be legal injunctions against the porn industry, or that they should be sued in submission.
That we need to, well, question our own decency and, well, rely on a change of thought. But is it possible to step on the brakes in that way?
Well, I would say you absolutely need to change the way people think about it. But I would argue that this has gotten so big and so enormous, and we're at such a crisis level.
Yeah, what a crisis. People are actually having access to pornography and images that they seem to like. And Gail Dines has a problem with this because she's a oversensitive idiot.
That you need a kind of public health approach. So one would be certainly education and changing the way people think, but I would absolutely argue for legislation as well. I mean, you know, if you want to stop this, then you have to figure out a way for Icelandic men not to have access to hardcore pornography.
Personally, that sounds like censorship to me, no matter how many ways you cut it. And according to Gail Dines, she isn't pro-censorship. Well, admittedly. So what does she want? She wants the government to step in and stop hardcore pornography because she doesn't like it. I'm sorry, society isn't governed by stuff that you don't like. If you don't like it, just don't engage with it.
If you really want women and girls to have gender equality in Iceland, then you cannot be basically feeding your boys and men a steady diet of pornography. The two don't go together.
Yes, they can if you focusing on individuality, unlike you who wants to focus on collectivism and constant victimization.
So I would agree, yes, you need to change thought, but you need to think about legislative activity as well.
Censorship, you hypocrite.
You've also written about how this affects, well, the human trafficking.
Yes. Well, what happens is, let me begin with saying this. I am the mother of a son.
I'd like to point out she's also married, and some feminists have a problem with, like Andrea Dawkins has a problem with marriage because she considers it rape by contract. She could make the argument that she did it for her own personal choices, so why aren't people allowed to choose to be in pornography?
I do not believe that my son or anyone else's son is born a John. Okay? So if we do not believe that men are born Johns, then we have to ask what is in the culture that socialises them to want sex with trafficked or prostituted women?
My point on prostitution, it should be totally legal and taxed. As for my personal opinion of why people go to prostitutes, maybe desperation, maybe they want to try something new, maybe they actually like it.
And I would argue that one of the key socialising agents for our boys is pornography. If you think men are born Johns and rapists and batterers, and
nobody knows why people rape, batter and hurt other people. It's one of life's great mysteries.
I think that's a very depressing attitude. And I, for one, as a mother of a son, refuse to sign into that. And as a feminist, I refuse to sign into that. Because what I say is that feminists are men's best friends.
Fuck you! All feminists do is complain about how they're being oppressed and how the patriarchy is evil and how everything would be better if they were in charge. And that somehow that they all have to castrate themselves and die in horrible accidents all the fucking time, while they sit back and get most of the benefits with none of the work.
We are the ones who believe in men's humanity. So what we argue is that we need to stop these industries shaping them and turning them into Johns and abusers.
You're a fucking secretary. Fuck you! Yeah, that's my message to you. Fuck you and kiss my ass.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, it was a pleasure.
There you have it, the final conclusive proof that Gail Dines is pro-censorship and she has no idea what she's talking about.